Okay, in today's video, we're going to be talking about what human impact has on the ecosystem. So, we're going to be looking at various pollution causing effects that humans have, as well as ways that we can conserve the resources that we have here on the planet. Now, for the human impact notes, again, use your note sheets, and on the left hand column, write down all the bolded definitions. And on the right hand column, write down any examples or extensions that you might hear from the video or see in the slides that'll help you remember. And in pictures that are in your notes will also be referenced in here and talked about and labeled for your reference. So, to start everything off, we're going to talk about what non renewable and renewable resources are. So, non renewable resources are resources that are used up faster than they can be replenished. Some examples of this would be fossil fuels and non renewable things, such as like gasoline and oil, that we just do not have the time to replace in the way that we use. Now, renewable resources are resources that can be replenished over time fairly quickly and therefore can't be really used up. One of the ways that one of the resources that we see that's pretty renewable is trees and a lot of greenery that we can grow. But we do have ways of using that up a little bit faster than we can replenish it. But it is renewable if we use it correctly. On this resource, which you have in your notes, is a list of renewable and non renewable resources. On the left hand side, some renewable resources are solar energy, so drives like wind power and hydropower. So these different sources are pretty much always going to be there. We're going to have wind, we're going to have moving water, and the sun's there. So we can capture those sources. Fresh water, for the most part, is renewable, though we are using it up at a little bit faster rate than it can be replenished. Some soils used for agriculture can be replaced. Wood for construction, we can plant new trees. And some animal species, we can use certain animals for transport, and we can use chicken eggs and things for creating vaccines, so we can reuse that resource. But some non renewable resources are energy sources like coal, oil, natural gases, and nuclear energy. There's a limited amount of all of those sources. And once they're gone, it would take a really long time for them to come back. Tropical forest is another one. It just takes a really long time for a tropical forest to grow. And then minerals like diamond, gold, and iron just can't be replaced in the way that we use them. So, one of the sources of pollution that humans can do while using up certain resources is air pollution. And air pollution describes any undesirable factor or pollutant that is added to the air that can negatively affect the health of an ecosystem and the organisms that live within it. So, we're going to talk about some effects of air pollution. I want you to be thinking about a few more, especially some that you looked at in the readings that we've been doing this past week. But air pollution, for the most part, like if you think about stuff that is going to prevent a organism to grow, so we can think of things that are like asthma, things that can cause cancer. Those are different things that are that you breathe in the air. Those are things that can be caused by humans, and those are sources of air pollution. So here are some sources. We have power plants can produce sulfur oxides into the air, and that creates acid rain. We can have some building home industry things create greenhouse gases like CO2 that can cause the temperature to rise. And then we have smog precursors, which are nitric oxides that are produced from factories and transportation. So these things can cause smog, difficulty breathing in cities, and things like that. One of the good references is to look up Beijing, China, and see what Beijing, China is on a normal day. It's often got a lot of smog, more than people can handle. Now, when we get a lot of these gases up into the air, we'll have a warming of the earth, and that's something known as the greenhouse effect. So, a greenhouse effect occurs when greenhouse gases absorb energy and re radiate it in the earth and slow its release from the atmosphere. So, greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, methane, and water. So, what do you think are the greenhouse gases, and what do they affect over? Is one of the questions I really want you to know. Is like, so what is this effect that we have? And we'll see it with global warming. So the more and more we release CO2, the more and more the heat will be trapped by the sun. Increases the temperature, makes it harder for some plants to grow and certain other organisms to grow, increases the amount of CO2. So really look into global warming resources that are out there online to get an understanding of how the greenhouse effect works for this. So we just talked about global warming, and here's the definition: is the trend of increasing global temperatures over time. So the increase in greenhouse gases is often linked to this increase in global temperatures, though there are some other factors. But we've been seeing that this increase in greenhouse gases has been larger than any other time in the Earth's history. And we've been seeing an increase in temperature faster in the Earth's history. So it's a high correlation between those two. So based on this, does this sound like an air pollution or a water pollution problem? Because we can also have water in the atmosphere involved with this too. So it's a good idea to kind of think about what is really causing global warming and kind of go out there and do some looking for yourself. Now, along with air pollution, we've also been learning about water pollution. And water pollution is the introduction of a chemical, physical, or biological agent. So something that can mess things up, something added to the water that negatively affects the water quality and the lives of the organisms that rely on water. Um, so a couple of things like that can be, we've recently been talking about lead in the water. We can have certain traces of elements like mercury, certain chemical pollutants that can be very toxic to people as well, and other organisms that live in the water and things that need water to survive. So water pollution can cause from a couple of different things, but we really narrow them down to two things, which are called point source and non-point source pollution sources. So a point source pollution source can be traced back to a single source, usually a mine or a factory, that is dumping some kind of a toxin into water or some kind of lake. Another good idea of a point source pollution agent would be fracking, where they use water and sand to get oil out of areas in recently emptied oil derricks, so that they can go ahead and get that money out, or money within the form of oil out of that area. And non-point source pollution sources come from many different sources that are usually difficult to identify. And a good example of this is runoff from roads. So roads just so happen to be very great at picking up a lot of things that come off of cars, and holding it there. And then when rain runs that into a natural water source, you can have pollution. It's not really a source from any one particular thing, but it is a source of water pollution. So here's a good illustration that shows us some of those water pollution sources. We can see dumping of toxins, industrial facilities, and sewage treatment plants. Those are direct charges into the water that can cause water pollution. And here we have urban runoff and agricultural runoff. Those can be indirect discharges into the water as well. So human threats to biodiversity. Here's some direct things that we don't actually think about when just humans exist on the planet. We have something known as habitat fragmentation. So it occurs when we create a barrier that prevents organisms from accessing their entire habitat. You can think of this like building a subdivision inside of a wetland or a plains. And instead of a like a bobcat being able to run across that entire area, or prairie dogs being able to have that entire area to live in, they now no longer can get across that because there's a barrier, like a wall built up that they can't get across. And then we also have introduced species. Humans bring species from other areas of the world, and that threatens the sustainability of the ecosystem. And that really is a type of almost pollution in a way, because it can cause a huge, huge threat to the biodiversity in the area. So one of the things that we try to practice to prevent this kind of issue is a sustainable development model. So it's a practice in which natural resources are used and managed in such a way that it meets the current needs without harming future generations. And you're going to start seeing more and more talk about how do we make homes sustainable, how do we make neighborhoods sustainable, and not take more than what it actually is needed to produce these things, and things that we can put the resources back in, so that we don't cause too much harm to the environment. So there's a really big focus on the sustainable development model, and one of the big pushes in Milwaukee for that is urban gardening. So we'll have urban gardens put in between houses, and it's a way of being able to create a community with green spaces as well as homes, so we don't do as much of a damage to the area that was there before. And we're also going to be talking about these things known as umbrella species. So an umbrella species is a species of organism that is protected because the protection means a bunch of other organisms are also going to be protected. So it's kind of complicated to think about, but in India, they started protecting tigers. And since tigers lived in a certain area, people would stop coming into those areas to harm the tigers. And by the stopping the hunting of the tigers, a bunch of other organisms and habitats were allowed to survive as well. So that takes us to the end of our notes. Please go back and look at any of the readings after you've read this. And if there's any confusion there, hopefully these notes will help you out there. Ask any questions, leave any comments, and I'll be happy to help out. And that's it.